This film beautifully depicts the bond between a teacher and a student, showing how their relationship develops and the extent of their connection. Let's begin. Lila, a 38-year-old teacher, has recently gone through a divorce. While traveling by train, we see Smith sitting alone in his room, appearing anxious and lost in thought. Meanwhile, Lila arrives at her new school, where the principal welcomes her and introduces her to the staff. She is also given information about the class she will be teaching. Coincidentally, Smith is one of her students. However, their first impression of each other is unremarkable. Smith is quiet and withdrawn, barely speaking. After school, we see Smith's family, who are overly protective of him. His older brother is in prison for smuggling, and his parents worry that Smith might follow the same path. Hoping to improve his academic performance, they frequently transfer him to different schools, but no real progress is made. Frustrated, Smith eventually runs away and begins engaging in the same illegal activities as his brother, selling drugs and making deliveries for money. However, he is not doing this for personal gain. His true goal is to provide a good education for his younger sister, as his parents cannot afford it. The next day, Lila does not pay much attention to Smith either. After class, the school's social studies teacher introduces himself and invites her to lunch, which she accepts. Meanwhile, Smith and his friends talk about their new teacher. That night, Lila feels lonely and calls her mother for comfort. Her brother also joins the conversation to keep her company. Meanwhile, Smith returns home late, and his mother warns him to avoid bad influences and make better choices. Frustrated, Smith storms off to his room. The following day, after class, Smith approaches Lila for help with an essay. She asks about the topic, but he says it is personal and that he cannot share it. Wanting to build a connection with her students, Lila tells him he can ask her anything instead. However, Smith remains silent and leaves the classroom. Curious, Lila follows him, concerned that he might be upset. However, another teacher, Cheyenne, stops her and advises her not to waste time on students like Smith, claiming they have no future. Lila, however, believes she can positively influence all her students and maintain a supportive relationship with them. Determined to understand her students better, she reviews their personal records. She learns that Smith is a new student who was expelled from his previous school due to frequent fights. Later, during a poetry session, students take turns reading their work. When it is Smith's turn, his poem captivates Lila. She finds herself deeply moved, though she cannot fully understand the emotions it stirs within her. After submitting his assignment, Smith prepares to leave, but Lila stops him to praise his poem. She gently advises him to share his emotions with someone, as it might help him feel better. However, Smith is not someone who easily opens up. That evening, Lila returns home and finds divorce papers sent by her ex-husband. He has already signed them, but she simply sets them aside. A few days later, Andrew, a salsa coach, invites Lila to dinner. Since she does not have many people in her life at the moment, she agrees. At school, we see the first signs of a casual bond forming between Lila and Smith. He shares a few things with her before heading home. That night, while Lila is on her dinner date with Andrew, Smith happens to see her. He does not approach her, just watches from a distance. The next day, Lila notices Smith leaving her classroom. After school, he returns, running to apologize. She reassures him, saying she stayed back just to help him because she noticed he had not been feeling well. Jokingly, Smith responds, "I drank too much last night." Surprised, Lila asks what he means. Smith then admits. The previous night, Smith had seen Lila at the bar. When he brings it up, Lila laughs and asks him not to tell anyone. This sparks a warm and friendly conversation between them. Later that night, while Lila is talking to her mother about her date, Smith suddenly appears at her door. He looks badly beaten. Concerned, Lila immediately invites him in, tends to his wounds, and asks what happened. However, Smith remains silent and tries to leave. Lila stops him, insisting that it is too late to go out, and offers to drive him home. On the way, she gently asks about his family, but Smith avoids answering. As they reach his home, it starts to rain heavily. The weather is beautiful. Smith steps out of the car, but Lila hesitates for a moment before finally stepping outside as well. Seeing this, Smith smiles and asks if she could teach him the dance she was doing at the bar. He steps closer, but Lila quickly moves away and gets back into the car. Before dropping him off, she firmly tells him that their relationship must remain strictly that of a teacher and student. Smith does not respond and simply walks away. The next day, Lila keeps her distance from Smith, and he notices. Understanding the situation, he decides not to approach her unnecessarily and goes home. There, his mother sees his improved grades and beams with pride. She tells him how happy she is that he is focusing on his studies. Smith replies that it is all thanks to his new teacher, who has been helping him. Hearing this, his mother smiles and says, "Then I should meet her sometime." That night, Lila goes on another date with Andrew, but Smith happens to be there as well. Lila grows bored and frustrated with Andrew's endless questions and excuses herself to the restroom. When she steps out, Smith follows her, and suddenly kisses her. Caught off guard, Lila hesitates but ultimately kisses him back, realizing she is beginning to develop feelings for him. However, she quickly comes to her senses, realizing her mistake, and rushes back to her seat. Meanwhile, Andrew sits alone when Cheyenne approaches him. She starts talking about Smith and Lila, making suggestive remarks to turn Andrew against them. Later that night, Smith goes to Lila's house, but the gate is locked. He repeatedly asks her to open it, and she finally does. He tells her he is not there to hurt her, he just wants to confess his feelings. Lila, however, urges him to stay away, explaining that being close to her will only bring him trouble. She insists that he leave immediately. Despite their attempts to suppress their emotions, their feelings are undeniable. Eventually, they give in and share an intimate moment together. By morning, Lila makes Smith promise not to tell anyone about what happened between them. The scene shifts to the school, where Lila sits alone. Cheyenne approaches her, announcing that she and Andrew are now dating. Lila congratulates her and appears genuinely happy for her. Meanwhile, Smith borrows money from his smuggler friends and returns to school. When Andrew sees Lila, he asks about her mother. Although he has feelings for Lila, he has his reasons for holding back, and Cheyenne seems like the more practical choice for him. Moments later, Smith arrives and Lila leaves with him, which upsets Andrew. He cannot help but feel jealous. Later in class, Smith gives Lila a gift, a gold chain he bought with the borrowed money. Lila loves it. Smith then proposes to her, but she only smiles and does not give an answer. When Smith leans in to kiss her, Lila stops him, reminding him that they need to act normal in public to avoid suspicion. Despite this, they enjoy spending time together outside of school, eating, talking, and having fun. Their relationship deepens. But no love story is without its challenges. One day, they take a trip outside the city, capturing photos and having heartfelt conversations. During this time, Smith finally opens up about his family. After returning home, some of Smith's smuggler friends confront him about the money he owes. They give him an address for a delivery, but Smith has already decided to leave that life behind. Still, he struggles to find the courage to tell them. Later, his mother stumbles upon photos of Smith and Lila on his phone. Unaware that Lila is his teacher, she is happy to see her son with someone. The next day at lunch, Lila visited Smith to collect a file. Smith reassured her that what happened between them would not affect their friendship and that he still considered her a good friend. She smiled and left. However, things took a turn when Smith's mother noticed Lila speaking with other parents during a school meeting. She began to suspect that Lila was the woman from the photos on Smith's phone. When it was her turn to meet Lila, her suspicion was confirmed. Furious, she confronted Lila, accusing her of distracting her son instead of helping him focus on his studies. She demanded that Lila end whatever was going on between them immediately, warning that if she didn't, she would expose everything. Smith's mother stormed off just as the principal arrived. Noticing her anger, the principal asked Lila what had happened. Lila, trying to cover up the situation, lied and said that Smith's mother was just in a hurry to leave. That night, when Smith returned home, his mother confronted him. "You need to stop this. She's your teacher," she yelled. But Smith stood his ground. "This isn't just about a teacher and a student. I love her, and I would do anything for her." His father, who had seen a positive change in his son because of Lila, initially supported him, but his mother persisted. "What if one day your daughter wanted to marry a middle-aged man?" she argued. Eventually, even his father hesitated, realizing how complicated the situation was. Meanwhile, Lila confided in her mother, who was furious. "You should have thought about this before taking such a step," she scolded. Lila's brother also disapproved, leaving her feeling completely alone. She now had to make an impossible choice: her love or her family. Determined to see Lila, Smith visited her home that night, but she asked him to leave, afraid of losing her job. They argued, and Smith, heartbroken, walked away. Later that night, he left a note at her gate simply saying, "Sorry." When Lila saw it, she opened the gate and found Smith standing there with flowers. They spent the night together, and the next morning they discussed what to do next. Smith suggested using his savings to move away together, but Lila refused. "We need to think rationally," she said. At school, Andrew saw them talking and became furious. Cheyenne, always eager to stir trouble, fueled his anger. That night, while Lila was working late, Andrew cornered her and tried to force himself on her. Smith noticed her distress and was overcome with rage, but Lila stopped him. "Andrew knows about us," she warned. "Don't act recklessly." But the next day, Smith lost control and attacked Andrew at school, causing a huge scene that led to police intervention. Smith was arrested. Days later, when he was released, Lila was waiting for him outside the police station, but before he could reach her, his mother pulled him away, leaving Lila heartbroken. Determined to help Smith, Lila called Andrew and arranged a meeting. She revealed that she had footage of the incident where he assaulted her and threatened to report him unless he withdrew his case against Smith. Cornered, Andrew had no choice but to comply. Days passed, but Smith never returned to school. Lila felt guilty, believing she had ruined both of their lives. She decided to leave the city for a fresh start. As she packed her bags, Smith appeared at her doorstep, his eyes filled with tears. When he saw the packed luggage, his voice broke. "Where are you going?" "I have a train at 2 p.m., she replied. Smith, devastated, fell to his knees, begging her not to leave. But Lila gently told him that he had a bright future ahead. "You need to focus on your studies and your career," she urged. Despite Smith's desperation, Lila had made up her mind. Smith returned home and broke down. His mother consoled him, saying, "Life doesn't end here. There will be more heartbreaks in the future." Meanwhile, Lila sat in her empty home, rereading the poem that had first drawn her to Smith. We return to the scene from the beginning of the story. Smith, confined in his room, mourning deeply. Perhaps this was the first time he had truly experienced heartbreak, because sometimes we must leave certain relationships incomplete for the sake of both people involved. Not every love story gets a perfect ending. Some remain grounded, while others are left longing for the sky. Now, my question to you is, when was your first heartbreak? Share your story in the comments below. See you in the next video.